everyone. My name is Belinda Kwan. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm the Research and Development Manager at InterAccess. To give you a visual description of myself, I'm an East Asian person with shoulder-length hair. I'm wearing cat eye eyeliner, and I'm wearing a dark gray shirt. You can see me from the chest up. In my background, you can see a cube modular bookshelf and a mix of fake and real plants. We're giving you a very warm welcome to today's panel titled New Arts Worker Paradigms, Innovative Cultural Stewardship, Ownership, and Resource Allocation Models. Today's conversation will dive into innovative community-led learning models, examine the intersection of traditional and emerging resource allocation models, and highlight the role of intersectionality in cultural stewardship and ownership. This event is presented by InterAccess, Tangled Art and Disability, and FEZIHAUS as part of two projects, Terra Firma and Conversas. To learn more about these projects and partners, please see the podcast episode description. We're really pleased to have Elle, Samito, and Kitoko Mai as our panelists today, with Owais Lightwala moderating. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which InterAccess operates has been the site of human activity for 15,000 years. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We acknowledge this treaty, but we also are critical of the ways in which it continues to be breached by settlers and newcomers. In this state of affairs, we commit to the work of renewed Indigenous sovereignty. The meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous folks from across Turtle Island, and we are both grateful and responsible for the ways we meet together, learn, and engage in creative practices here. We also acknowledge all displaced communities who are not settlers and those whose ancestors and community members were forcibly displaced and made to work on these lands. We acknowledge the Black communities that have been and continue to be central to community building, anti-racism, and anti-colonialism here and beyond. In light of current events, it's relevant to speak up in support of Palestinian rights against ongoing Israeli apartheid. We emphatically support Palestinians' right to live without the threat of losing their homes and livelihood to the ongoing illegal and violent settler colonialism. And we join other national and international organizations and governmental entities in calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and the West Bank. As artists, cultural workers, and academics, we stand strong in support of the Palestinian struggle for freedom and against all forms of racism and settler colonial violence. InterAccess continues striving to provide support and advocacy for individuals and communities who actively face the most entrenched systemic barriers across historical, cultural, socioeconomic, and political realms. Since this is an online event, we encourage attendees to share their own land acknowledgements in the chat or in the comments of the podcast, and to reflect on the ways that digital infrastructure and territory have specific relationships to land and the past, present, and future dynamics of colonization and decolonization. Without further ado, please give our guests a warm welcome. I'll pass it over to Owais, our moderator for today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Owais Lightwala. I'm so delighted to be the moderator today and meet these lovely folks and have this discussion where I'm looking forward to learning a lot about what everybody's thinking and doing. I'm a professor by day at the Creative School at Toronto Metropolitan University, which you might remember as Ryerson University. And prior to that, I used to be a theater producer, ran a company called Why Not Theater for a decade as a managing director. And I also do a whole bunch of stuff in the arts and creative industries around innovation, entrepreneurship, leadership are some of the areas I'm particularly passionate about. Visually speaking, I'm a South Asian brown man. I'm wearing a pink shirt, sitting against a plain white wall. with no plans of any sort, but just to bed. And I have a black beard, which is need a little bit of grooming, and a twirly mustache like a 1940s bad guy from one of those black and white movies. And with that, I will ask Samito to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Owais. I'm Samito. My pronouns are he and him. A description of myself: I'm a black male of Mozambican origins. I'm wearing a black shirt, glasses, an earring, and a necklace. In my background, I have a few plants in a window. I'm the founder of FEZIHAUS, which I like to call a label-inspired workroom, which is the objective is to bring together creatives of color to create around values of fairness in ownership, um, well-being, but also freedom of exploration. We have, since 2020, been able to run a few projects, musical projects, but including also an event that combined like a open air market and 6 hours of like a dance party. And then lately we just launched this new project called Conversas, which is a series of conversations around equity within the context of decolonization. And part of it is that we're going to share those as a podcast and video series, which is why we're here and how we partner with Terra Firma. That's me.
Okay, maybe Kitoko, would you like to go next? Am I saying that correctly?
Hi, Kitoko. Hi, my name's Kitoko. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a dark-skinned Black person with long pink braids, and I'm wearing a sweater that says Spitfire and has a little demon in the middle. How can you remind me the prompts for
Who are
introducing?
you? What do you do? And maybe something that's on your mind right now.
Yeah, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm based in Hamilton, but I also work in Toronto sometimes. I work mostly in theater, and I'm venturing into film, which is its own thing. Um, I tend to tell stories from my lived experience, and I like to prioritize process over product. And so I'm currently my theater collective, or my multi-arts collective, Fempire, is currently in residence with Hamilton Fringe Festival Theater Company. And we're working towards a sort of like anti-capitalist, disability justice-oriented collective for like neurodivergent queer artists in Hamilton to continue to get to like be together, commune, grow, and like make art. Yeah. I'm really trying to simplify my artist bio because I'm getting grumpy, and so my like intention is just to like have fun and learn things. So happy to be here.
Elle?
Hello, I'm Elle. Elle, Barbara. Who am I? Oh my God, I feel like I have so much to say. But I'm a brown-skinned Black trans woman of Haitian descent, based in Montreal. I have a 30-inch wig on right now, and red and white striped shirt, crop top, and you see me from the shoulders up, and there's a white wall behind me, and I have bangs, and sadly no makeup, so I kind of look like a bimbo with no makeup. um, Despite what my voice suggests, I mean, I already said I'm a trans woman, and I transition as an adult, so I may sound to you like a man, but I look like a woman, for lack of better terms or more sensible terms. And yeah, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I've been on the scene for, I want to say, like close to 15 years in Montreal. I first came up as a singer, songwriter, like a musical artist. My artistic practice in music is very holistic, and so far as it integrates, I like to integrate fashion, like visuals, as well as composition into what I do. And I have since branched out into different practices. I directed a medium length short film last year. I have also put on stage plays, though they wouldn't necessarily register to all as theater, but more sort of in line with like conceptual performance and experimental theater. I recently presented one of those shows starring children from my house, which I'll get to later, in Vancouver, BC. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm also mother of the House of Barbara. So I've been involved in ballroom in Montreal's nascent ballroom scene for quite a few years. Not as much since the end of the pandemic, I must admit, but I'm still the mother. And yeah, I have children whom I try to push in whatever creative endeavors they want to go in, and the sort of like stage shows. And even the film that I've spearheaded include them. And yeah, I don't know what else to say, but I'll stop right here.
It's very interesting, and I would like to find out a little bit more and understand more about the structure of that, given the conversation prompt that we've been given. So I'll try to remember that, Elle, and come back to you about the structure of a house and the world of ball. The panel prompt that we were given is a pretty ambitious one, I think. New arts worker paradigms, innovative cultural stewardship, ownership, and resource allocation models. So basically everything. Let's just talk about everything in 2 hours and solve all the problems. It's a lot of words, and I guess I want to start a little bit simpler, and just kind of ask each one of you, and anyone can jump in with whoever feels like you've got a burning answer to this. I'm curious about what the world is like for you as an artist right now, as you're making work, and what challenges you're finding, what opportunities you feel like are easily available to you, what barriers or obstacles specifically that you're struggling with right now in this moment, and in that kind of what is it that the world around you feels like it's going through right now. And anyone can jump in to kind of kick us off to really, let's make this a little bit less abstract. Because paradigms and cultural stewardship and ownership, I think for a lot of people are like very abstract ideas, and I'm just wanting to get a more personal sense of where are you at right now in your world, in your practice.
I feel like my heart's gonna like jump out of my chest because I'm like really mad. In like I hope a constructive way. I think that for me, like right now, to be transparent, like I'm in the hospital.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, I'm in the hospital right now, so you might hear like some announcements. I'm in an inpatient program for mental health. The mental health side of things is like kind of a mess, especially for like women, trans, non-binary people, just like trying to get doctors to take you seriously, and navigate that alongside trying to like survive capitalism, but as an artist full time. I have always had mental health issues, but managed with like being in academia and having funding for school, and then went into the adult entertainment industry where I could like charge $400 for an hour of my time. And that empowered me to be an artist because it meant I didn't have to say yes to everything. And I could say yes to contracts that were like safe and like beneficial. And then I graduated around the time, and then the pandemic happened. So I like graduated into the pandemic as like an emerging theater artist ready to like make theater. And then the theater industry went under because of the pandemic. And I feel like my cohort of like collaborators are all kind of in this space of like we were expecting to be able to practice our craft and like develop those relationships and like start our careers. Some of us like moved to Toronto, and then we're stuck with like expensive rent and like limited options for work. And so right now what I'm finding in like my like communities and for myself is that like everybody's like mentally ill. We're all using, we were before, but like traumatized by the pandemic and not prepared to like talk about it because it's still happening. And a lot of the art that we're making, I feel like is like no longer like just like entertainment. It's kind of becoming like expressive arts therapy, like a way to like cope, because like people also like, I can't afford therapy and stuff like that. So it's like shifted my practice completely from being about like, I want to tell stories for people who look like me to come see or like to like have fun, to like, I'm trying to like navigate my artistic practice so I can survive the world and like find ways to get paid. Was this answering your question? Everybody looks really serious.
Oh,
Sad.
100%. I mean, it
Okay.
is serious. Like you're describing some very real circumstances. So apologize if our faces are reflecting some concern, and hopefully you are being taken care of right now and continue to get support. But it is really, really very, very personal and very, very real. So first of all, thank you for letting us into that and kicking us off with such a deep dive, because normally this is like takes 90 minutes to get warmed up, but I love this group already. We're getting real from the get-go. So I appreciate that. And in what you said, I also want to kind of just draw out some of the things I heard around the biggest theme for me is that survival right now in the world for you is so challenging that the idea of art making is not actually the primary driver of your life right now. It's uh, the survival is the first challenge, and then if you are able to survive, then making art sounds like a privilege and a luxury. Um, and it's interesting also the way you've described the shift of the artistic practice going from becoming something that is a external facing thing for other people's benefit to what is it going to do and how is it going to help me survive? Because this context of the challenges that you're facing are so many and so traumatizing. And art is a very powerful tool, right? We have used it for millennia as a maybe it's the only thing that we have for making sense of our insane world. So I first of all, thank you again for jumping right in and so bravely into the prompt. And I want to hear from Samito and Elle. And I also do want to say, whatever level of comfort you guys have sharing, obviously everybody will have their own level of comfort, and I don't need to make it sound like everybody needs to go super real on me, but I do want to hear your personal kind of experience and perspective so that we're grounding this conversation in what are we actually talking about? What is this culture thing? What is this arts worker thing? It's not abstract, it's real people.
I'll jump in. Thank you so much, Owais, for such a great question. Kitoko, thank you for being so vulnerable and letting us know from the get-go. I think it's such a great thing because it allows us to also remove our own, masks and, just engage in a real way. On my side, I think the best way to anchor my situation right now is one of I'm not making art because I spend a lot of time trying to run sort of FEZIHAUS, has this survival thing that I managed to create as the pandemic started in 2020. But it was very much informed by years of sort of touring in music, going from like serious like legal battles on my first record, not being able to release it, and then jumping in with a different record label and touring for 2 years to the point of exhaustion. And at that point, I consider the single best decision of my life was to actually stop everything when nobody wanted me to do that, because I was signed to like, a label to a booking agency, and everyone was generating money through, the whole system, the grants and all of that. And completely broke, full of anxiety, completely depressed, not really bleak. I decided I'm gonna stop everything, and even if it meant risking every little security I had, which was like that came from the touring and being paid regularly, for playing a show. And I made a move because I still have my family in Mozambique. I decided I was going to go to Mozambique. I got my sister who helped pay the ticket, and I went back and I stayed there for 5 weeks. And I wanted to go back to the place where my passion for music started, because at that point I didn't know. I didn't even like music the same way I used to, you know. Um, and what it did, it was really a miracle for me, because out of just seeing like a bleak descent, being there allowed me to sort of reconnect with the more important things in my life and reconnect with music. I met people, and I just realized at that point that the insecurity that I actually feared, and the fear I had from saying no to the music industry and everyone who sort of supported me, was actually not more important than my health. And that for me was a changing moment in my life, because it brought me, when I came back to Montreal, I decided to end every contract that I had and jump into the empty journey, and start building something. So from 2018 to 2020, I started conceptualizing this new place, FEZIHAUS, which was to be, at that point, sort of, I recognized that there was an interrelation between freedom of exploration, which for me meant being able to do what I want, and then owning your rights and owning your music, even if it doesn't generate any money, right? Because at this point, we're not making any money with that. And then well-being, which is health, So I realized that those 3 points really, really had to be, for a sustainable practice, those 3 things needed to be aligned. And I decided to build FEZIHAUS around those values. And then the pandemic hit. We were fortunate at that point to have received a grant to produce a new project. And I used that money to sort of hire people that look like me from my community at all levels to sort of build the different parts of the project, graphic design, the music videos, and that is what sort of initiated this whole new phase. And at this point, I'm just also scrambling to try to figure out how to pay my rent. And what has helped was having this sort of company, because now I have the agency to go get a little bit of money and put it in it. Now it's not sustainable. Like from one year to the other, I don't have any money but that's where I am. And I don't really make music at this point. I have to spend all the time, trying to survive.
Yeah, I very much hear you on that, as someone who started and built many companies. That building of companies is a kind of a mixed blessing, where especially the more successful your enterprise becomes, the less you get to do of the thing that you built the entity to do, because you get sucked up in the managing of it and the running of it and the fundraising and the all the other work that you're doing. And if music was the passion, the reason why you got into it in the first place, it's hard to make time for them. But you know, on the flip side, you're making something that hopefully is empowering other people's voices in music to get into the world. But I do want to get into the understanding the nuances of what FEZIHAUS's model is a bit more with you in this conversation. But before we do that, Elle, I would love to hear kind of your perspective on, where are you situated in the world right now in terms of challenges, opportunities, your practice as an artist. Like, how is that going for you?
Well, there's different ways to talk about it, but I would like to say, all in all, that I have erred on the side of unhappiness in the last year plus as an artist. Kitoko mentioned the pandemic, which a lot of people have had a hard time. A lot of artists have had a hard time with. Like, it definitely took a toll on our mental health, and we have been collectively traumatized by it. Um, but besides that, I don't know. I feel like, as much as I've discovered the benefit of uh, public subsidies, like as far as like arts funding, public arts funding in Canada. as well as in Quebec. I have found it at times limiting in the last few years, insofar as I realize that I kind of like I depend on them to be able to move my practice forward and like put on the projects that I want to put on. So I find it unfortunate. I find us like fortunate in Canada that like we have access to like such a like a seemingly well organized system, but at the same time, it's unfortunate that like our system of like arts patronage and like cultural philanthropy doesn't seem as developed as it is in New York and LA, based on some of the acquaintances that I have told me. Um, so yeah, I don't want to come off as like too like as totally ungrateful, because I have had some grants and some opportunities, and I have come to you know, a state of like recognition as an artist in my local community, but sometimes I have bigger projects and it's just exhausting to you know, to hold on to the possibility of getting um uh, an arts grant. And I think that it creates a system where only the more financially privileged are able to create consistently. So not only does it affect us on a personal level, but also on a community, like on a broader community level, in the sense that there is a lack of diversity in the voices that are like represented in the arts. It'd be interesting to not just hear from people who've had it financially easy their whole lives, whether it's through like money or like having access to like higher education, but also people who come from working class backgrounds who have experiences, you know, being street involved, being like a chronically addicted, and so, yeah, and like the system that we have now doesn't really, I find that it hasn't like really totally solved the solution. Like grants are not enough. I feel that, you know, there were talks in the last few years of like universal basic income, and I think that that would be so relevant for artists.
So this is
So
a great segue, actually, because you started mentioning examples of other places and contexts where you feel like there's a culture of patronage or a system of cultural funding and resourcing that is more successful. I'm curious if you can expand on that a little bit. You mentioned New York and LA in passing, but like, what are the models that you have seen elsewhere, or even in Canada, in parts of Canada, that you think are successful at, particularly this question of like, how do we reach people or support the voices that are the ones that are not getting the access? Because there is lots of public funding, but it's not reaching everybody. So where have you seen that successful?
well, I mean, it's based on what other like what artists and my observations of um like how artists navigate institutions in New York. There just seems to be like more, there's a stronger culture of private patronage.
Okay.
Whereas like I can't speak for all of Canada, but as far as Quebec is concerned, people are more used to having arts publicly funded for them. So they're
Hmm.
not used to paying for something that is outside of the sort of like more mainstream variety. And because there is that culture that is ingrained here, it's harder for artists who are on the come up or who don't abide by mainstream codes to get their stuff funded unless they get a grant, which can be extremely competitive, as we all know.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an interesting perspective because one of the things I often hear in Canada is a fear of American cultural funding systems, precisely for the same reasons you articulated, which is that it is coming from private sources and not from public sector sources. And people in Canada are very protective of public funding as uh, a way of increasing accessibility, because the public funding system has to be accountable. There needs to be peer assessment committees. There needs to be some kind of democratic process, right? It's public taxpayer money. So there needs to be some kind of accountability, right? So if Canada Council gives out grants, they have to publish, who did they give the grants to? How much money did they give? Who were the peer assessors? What was their process? But if a private foundation gives out funding, they don't answer to anybody in terms of why they made those choices. So it's interesting, this perspective that you're bringing of the access that could provide in a very different way, and the challenge of when public funding isn't enough, it just becomes very competitive and stressful, it sounds like, and not actually solving and who's going to win in that competition is the other question. Where are the actual resources going to go?
Yeah, where are the actual resources going to go? Because what happens is it becomes a contest of like who is able to be to convey like the impact and the feasibility of a project in writing, which is not necessarily given to all artists. Some artists like maybe like revolutionary in so many ways, and like we would all benefit from having their perspective, but they're not necessarily like they might not be as book smart, or they don't like know how to like put forward an idea in a way that will seem intelligible to the jury. So like we need to address those things.
Just to say, I think that's a really interesting point, because I feel like the perverse effect of the system that we have is that it sort of removes the value of the art. You know what I'm saying? Because we no longer care about the quality of what people are doing. And ultimately that affects our ability to actually have a sustainable practice. And I think that's one of the central issues that we have with the system. And it's a difficult situation because it's either one or the other, right? That's how we see it. But maybe we sort of encourage the arts sector to somewhat merge. I know, like, ideologically it might not be, but at this point where we are in terms of arts and the sustainability of our practice is almost gone, so I think it's actually doing that is also might be a sort of mechanism of survival as well, of like ensuring that the arts ecosystem actually can survive a little bit longer. I don't know, but I think there's a need for something, there's a need for a change in terms of how this is set up.
Kitoko, how's this resonating with you? I'll come back to you in a second. I just want to ask Kitoko, in terms of your experience with grants and public funding, where has that felt like satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and the option or possibility of other sources of funding? How is this sitting with you?
So interesting. I feel like personally, I have learned how to be good at grants, but when it comes to completing the project, often it's like the grant relies on like myself and like my identities to get it, and like being the sole artist, and sometimes there's not enough money to like ethically like invite someone to do labor. And I am someone who gets sick and also needs a lot of time and a lot of space to do things, and so I fear that it makes me seem like I'm not a good choice to like continue investing in. And I guess I was also thinking about like pathways towards sustainability that maybe like start with grants, because it's like you get a grant, you do the project, it's like you complete the product and then you're done. But then it's like, where do you go next? Like, how do we encourage artists to take that project and like turn it into a TV show, or like tour it around like the world, or like how can we continue like investing in the growth of the artist and the project long term, instead of just asking people to like continue to apply so we can say that we did something?
Yeah, for sure. And Elle, did you want to build on that? You were wanting to jump in a second ago.
Yeah, what Kitoko just said resonated with me, but I wanted to say that all in all, what has been sort of pivotal in my understanding of our common issues is the fact that we have to like a lot of us have to have day jobs. Like I've had two day jobs over the last year and nearly burnt myself out. And so because I have to I want to be stress free when it comes to paying my rent and all the basic stuff, but I also want to fund my own artistic practice in addition to the possibility of getting grants. So if we were absolved of that worry at least hashtag, possible universal basic income, then it would allow us to organize our a greater part of our time around our artistic practice. I was recently watching an interview, a bit of an interview on Instagram by the singer Lana Del Rey, whom I've never heard any of her albums, but she was saying how she was basically in essence saying how as she was starting her music career, she realized that she couldn't have like she wanted to go to business school at some point. And when she realized that she had to dedicate herself mainly dedicate herself to her artistic practice, that doors start to open for her. And so, that resonated with me because it brings us back to the idea of like, not coming from economic and class privilege and having to have day jobs which exhaust you and like juice you out of the energy that you need to put towards your artistic practice. So yeah, those are some of the issues.
Yeah. So, Samito, how is FEZIHAUS different? What's the model? What's the philosophy? How are you going to solve this problem of the chicken and egg, right? Like you gotta have money to be able to make art, but you can't make any money because you're making art and how are you gonna get around this?
Is a great question that I don't really have an answer for. I think it just speaks to this whole conversation, in that I think the way I end up making music is that, okay, if I have that one day when I have time to make music, I have to give it all. And if you ask me what's the model for FEZIHAUS, I say it's pretty much like sort of a left field. I'm just trying to figure out how to survive in an ecosystem that, doesn't necessarily encourage, I'm talking music specifically, right? Doesn't necessarily encourage people who are coming from the periphery, because in a way, in music, success is often predicated on your acceptance to actually assign all your agency to somebody else, whether it's financial, whether it's artistic as well. If you sign to people, you have to end up working with certain people, that might not really reflect the vision that you're looking for. So, but I run FEZIHAUS as a creative space as well for me to actually figure out ways to sort of trick the system. I trick the system in that I still think what has worked the best for me was to take on my agency when it comes to the business aspect of it, being able to like actually go find the money myself, which is a hard thing to do. But because I can do that, because I have the freedom to do whatever I want, I can look at the different systems and try or aspire to sort of figure out how to find the money. Like I'm talking money but there's no money, but it's like I am also looking right now, I'm considering how could I access money from private donors. That's one, because otherwise there is no sustainability, not even for my practice as well. So I don't know. I don't have a definite system, but what I've done was I'm sure I've done with the projects that we did was that I was able to go get money and put it in a way that allows me to pay other people and to build projects. And then project by project, we try and evolve and maybe build new partnerships, in the past year, it's been really great because I sort of, whatever I was doing actually resonated with Mutech, and Mutech sort of came in very strong as someone who's always like supporting everything I do. So even in terms of basic things like, okay, I need to apply for this grant. Can you support me? They just say yes, they're there for that. And that can change a life, for someone who has not had that level of support, So that unconditional support is actually what we need as people who are sort of pioneering like new concepts, new models. But also it has to be really coherent, in terms of the values who you're being supported with. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I mean,
yeah,
it's at least illuminating for me the challenge that we're kind of facing in this moment is the trade-off between agency and resources. So it sounds like the more resources you're given, the less agency you have, and the more agency you ask for, the less resources you have. And you're kind of stuck right now, at least in this moment of, you've already tried giving up agency path. That sounded like it was not for you. And you've reclaimed all of your agency in a very brave way, which I really commend you for. That sounds, I don't know that I have the courage to quit all of the contracts that I have. But the challenge now, of course, is like, okay, now how do I resource? And, Elle, I hear you on the universal basic income piece. Like that would be very revolutionary for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, not just for artists. But it does feel like where we are right now, that might not be happening tomorrow, or it might be a little bit of a ways away in terms of a outcome. Between now and then, does anybody have a solution that they've seen, or um, a proposal or a model, or any practice that they've seen somewhere that is currently working, that is currently getting closer to this goal of like, maintaining agency, having dignity and sustainability as an artist, but also making the work that you want to make, and it being successful? Where are you seeing that working?
Well, I can only speak, Elle speaking, I can only, rely on my personal experiences off the top of my head. And, I can say that like having at least a part-time job definitely helps.
Mhm.
But trying to maybe have I don't know, like if how lucky people generally are at finding people who may accompany them either in the direct writing of grant proposals, whether it is intended for like private foundations or for the public art system. Or at least someone to edit your work, that is extremely helpful. So, if anything, um, it'd be cool to perhaps think of, build establishing more solid networks of people who want to step in as like grant application editors and
Mm.
writers. Maybe that. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Um, I wonder if like reframing, like changing the intention of the project. Because I'm just thinking about this grant that I wrote um, with Canada Council, and it was to host a neurodivergent writers' room. So we were writing a script, but mainly it is a research project, and it was between 4 writers. So we just split the grant in 4, and everybody got like I think it was about like 6K for like a month or 2 of labor. And pretty much as soon as we started the project was done, because the research was to see like how could we like have a neurodivergent writers room. It wasn't to write the script. The script is extra. So so I mean that was one thing that I did for one of my cohorts that I think I'd like to repeat.
Can you just clarify when you say, you said something about changing the intention of the project, or the uh, narrative of the project? Like, what was it before, or what would have been generally that you changed it from into what you did propose?
I think pre-pandemic, the project would have been we're going to write this movie script together, and then the goal is going to be to produce it or get it produced. The
Uh-huh.
product is the script. The product is like a real
Mm-hmm.
thing. But this grant was a research project to see if 4 neurodivergent writers could understand their access needs and learn how to write in together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so even if we fail, we've actually completed the grant and succeeded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was about the artist's growth and like what they could take with them into the future writers' rooms. And like we will write the script we have, but um, there was something about designing the project that way that I think, I don't know, we weren't just artists, we were also like researchers, but the research we were doing was for our own benefit because we needed to do this research to
Mm-hmm.
thrive in this industry.
And to something you said earlier in terms of prioritizing process over product, it sounds like you were successful in getting your process funded rather
Yes.
than the product, which if you had the product funded, that would have to be the focus, right? You would have had to deliver the script regardless of whether or not the process gave you anything. But it sounds like getting your process funded allows you to have this artist growth, allows you to have this research, allows you to have this exploration time. And then if you make a script, great. Like probably that is something that will be valuable to all of you anyways. But it's challenging. I find it's very challenging for funders to fund process. They struggle with it. Product has a tangible appeal to us as something that we can then like see at the end. And process is a bit harder. It's harder to convince people of the value of process. What have you found in terms of trying to pitch for process funding and research funding?
The failures of the industry. So, like, I went to my dream company for a general meeting, and I was so excited. And I ended up asking them, and they're like good people. Like, this isn't like that shady, but like, I ended up asking about their experience working with neurodivergent writers, and they gave me a long answer that basically said that they didn't know and they haven't done that, which isn't true. It just means people haven't told them that they're neurodivergent or hiding. Um, and so the process becomes really important because if you want to include neurodivergent writers, but nobody knows how to work with neurodivergent writers because neurodivergence is such a huge spectrum, then the process is more important than the product. Like it has to happen, otherwise you can't function in the room. And I think that's actually the pitch. Like in order for like these 4 artists to be able to like contribute to the TV and film industry, like we have to do this learning on our own because it's not happening for us. Maybe that's what made it urgent. Yeah.
So definitely there's an element there of collaboration with the industry and bringing your experience and perspective forward. Elle, I want to pick up with you about House of Barbara. Can you tell me a bit more about how that works? What is the structure of a house? What are the relationships between the folks, individuals in that? What's the kind of model there? I'm interested in is there something around community and the way that community works that might be useful for the conversation we're having around how this artistic cultural project works?
Well, in order for me to get into House of Barbara, I have to explain the context of ballroom, generally speaking. And we're not speaking of ballroom dance, such as like cha-cha or like tango or salsa or what have you. But we're talking of ballroom as I want to say like a form of, it's not so much pageantry, it's like celebratory competition where different houses represent themselves as collectives. So it came out of the late 1960s in New York when trans or drag queens, perhaps of color, Black drag queens felt alienated from mainstream competition that were held and organized by white people, and so they decided to start their own circuit of like pageantry that that had different categories that people could walk. So they were not just beauty contests, but like from there on in, different like performative categories were included in ballroom, such as voguing, which had its first brush with the mainstream when people like Malcolm McLaren and Queen Latifah and Madonna used it in their songs and videos. And so the ballroom, since the 70s and 80s, has come to represent a hub for mainly Black and Latinx people who are on the sort of T2S LGBTQ plus spectrum, mainly gay, queer, and trans. So people who lived at those intersections to kind of come together, empower themselves. They were not like ballroom competitions called balls are not I mean, ballroom isn't just framed around balls, which are the competitions that ballroom has mostly come to be known for, but it's also a system of recreated families, if you will. For a lot of people who in decades prior were rejected from a very young age by their biological families because of their sexual or gender divergence. And so that's why in the ballroom system, you have different houses, usually named after high fashion or couture houses like Saint Laurent, Balenciaga, and so forth. And in each house, there are parental figures. You would think of as like mentorship figures. And you have the children who are usually like a generation under and kind of like coming up. And they eventually take over the house as house parents and mentor younger people. So that's it. And a few years ago, I was asked by a music and arts festival in Montreal to sit on their board, and I was asked to program something, and I couldn't come up with anything. I was feeling pretty nihilistic about like arts and music in general. Like, oh, how about I organize something that is going to shake things to their core, where you think that you know, in a very like a progressive circle, there would be events that centered people who lived at the intersection of Blackness and queerness, but that has not been the case in my life as a native Montrealer. So I decided to organize balls, seeing it as that, like as an event that would center Black queer people specifically. And that's how it came about, even though I had no experience whatsoever in ballroom. Um, and from then on, I summoned people I knew were involved in ballroom in Toronto, whose ballroom scene is like a way more developed and seemed to have like a stronger history than in Montreal. And so they contributed to kind of like laying the foundations of ballroom in Montreal as well. And like throughout the first years of me organizing balls, I wasn't thinking of myself as like as a house mother. Like I wasn't interested. I barely even had time to walk balls, like to walk like the competitions, if you will, because I was organizing most of them in Montreal. But some people on the scene started coming up to me and referring to me as Mother Elle. So that inspired me to start my own house and to foster the many artistic talents of people who are Black and younger than me. I have to say that the House of Barbara is an Afrocentric house, which is not the case in all houses in Montreal. There were some grievances on the scene regarding the fact that it was a bit too white at one point, but I think that you know, it has evolved quite a bit since. And there's also like an all African house in Montreal called the House of Sankofa. So yeah, and it's and people are like, I haven't organized lots of events in the last few years, mainly to focus on you know, other practices, including my own. But a lot of people have, you know, taken roles of leadership on the scene. So I'm not the only person, and I'm truly grateful for that.
This is a very fascinating. Thank you. I really appreciate the detail of this, because one of the things in the prompts of this conversation was around the idea of community-led, thinking about community-led approaches. And it sounds to me like very much this entire culture of ballroom came so much from the Black and queer community in a way that was not led by institutions, that was in fact, if anything, rejected and caused by the rejection of institutional spaces. I'm curious of how that evolution of that community-led thing, where is it now in terms of its relationship intersections with the conversations we were having around ownership, around economics, around sustainability? Because basically what I'm asking is like, how do people get paid? Do they get paid? What is the finance mechanisms of this community-led thing now? You know, are the organizers compensated? Are the participants compensated in any ways? What is that situation looking like right now?
Well, participants are compensated usually in the form of grand prizes because people who are involved in ballroom tend to take it very seriously. So even if they don't get paid to walk a ball, the goal is to win the bag, and so you're going to do everything to win, like, the $500 or the $1,000 prize. But of course, it's a bummer if you put a lot of time, effort, and money into your what is referred to as your effect, your getup, your outfit, and you don't win anything. Organizers usually ourselves. We remunerate ourselves as organizers. And as far as getting institutional, or I want to say like support from community, or like on a community organization level, I would say mostly I know that a collective that came out of ballroom named Ballroom for Community in Montreal has made an agreement with the city of Montreal, whose goal was to sort of like inject some like funding into underrepresented or like marginalized communities. So they decided to put money into ballroom. So that's really good. But then we could open up the conversation on who participates in the ballroom, because it used to be that it was only like you say, you take New York in the early 80s, there were hardly any like white middle class people partaking in ballroom. It was mostly marginalized people, like queer, gay people of color, who were street involved and could no longer go back to their biological families, and so they kind of like fell into ballroom. But it's become so celebrated as a culture on a mainstream level that a lot of people want to participate. People who don't see it for the sort of like as a communal, something that is like beneficial on like a communal level, because they could go elsewhere. Like they just use ballroom as like an outlet to shine, basically, but they don't need it as deeply. So I don't recall what I wanted to get to. Oh, right, the fact that ballroom has become more supported on an institutional level. People understand its importance. Community organizations and governmental institutions want to support it, but at the same time, I think that we have to do a constant work of sort of like evaluating who comes into our spaces, because it can easily veer off in a direction where it's only people that are middle class that like have access to that want to access our services as like ballroom or ballroom sort of like uh can you help me
Sorry,
with the word?
I don't know what the right word is, but I guess ballroom practice, ballroom community.
Yeah, as a ballroom community.
Is this something currently that you can get Canada Council funding for example? Like, is this a recognized, institutionally recognized artistic practice, and that it can get that kind of mainstream arts council funding?
Uh, I I think the Montreal Kiki Ballroom Alliance, as well as the Toronto Kiki Ballroom Alliance, have gotten some public funding, but of course, as is the case with a lot of marginalized, quote unquote, like marginalized practices, you have to lay out clearly how like the history of ballroom and how it works, in order to make sure that the jury clearly understands what it is and how essential it is for people in the community um, who are like intersectionally marginalized. So yeah, I believe so, but my practice as an organizer has mainly consisted in getting just like not getting it funded by institutions, because like the events are so popular that it's easy to break. It's fairly easy, in my experience at least, to break even by just throwing an event.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes like not just like the production back end, but also the grant prize money. And a lot of companies, like a lot of like corporations are interested in having their names associated with ballroom. The Pride organization, the organization that organizes Pride, is also interested in being affiliated with us because they're just like really popular events that people want to go to. It's not just like we're no longer in the era of ballroom as like a community resource. It's also like a bit of a spectacle in a way. Like a lot of people are interested in attending ballroom events because like the same way that you go see like a concert or a play. So yeah, it's fairly easy to, in my experience at least, to organize events like that.
I mean, it's fascinating just that you say that they are successful enough that they can financially cover the cost of these events as a reason why they don't need funding. Because the counter there basically scenario is that an event that is not successful at bringing people out, that nobody wants to go to, should get more funding because it's not able to survive. Like, there's a tension here always, I find, about demand and funding in terms of like what do communities want, what do audiences want to engage with, what are the people going to, and we have this perverse incentive in public funding where we reward, we have to kind of subsidize the things that need subsidy. It makes less sense to subsidize something that's doing well, but on the other hand, it sounds like this is such a strong community building activity that shouldn't we encourage more of it, and shouldn't the ballroom be everywhere, and shouldn't it be supported? Like there's a tension there that I don't have a answer to, but I just feel like worth naming in this around the incentives of public funding and how it works based on a subsidy model, which is, oh, you can't do this with the resources of the people coming together. It needs something additional. That's the only reason public funding exists, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm only speaking of my experience as an organizer, which has been successful. So I can't like
You can't
speak
speak to
to
the
like
less good organizers.
maybe I don't know about them. I don't know about those people, but yeah, no, like I'm just saying that like my events have been successful, but at the same time, it's not to say that like we wouldn't benefit from injecting more money and more resources into our events, because again, like my initial motivation in organizing balls was not to like, you know, be like a star or be known as like the mother of all mothers, like, you know, in Montreal. Like I wanted to create a space where Black people who are at the intersection of like sexual and gender diversity are centered. And so in that regard, like I've partnered with community organizations to get harm reduction material, handed over to people who not only walk balls, but also people who attend balls. And I think that like more money would create more incentives for people to be attracted to a hub that like is meant, like a communal hub that is meant for them. But like you just said, it sort of begs to ask the question, who does it benefit ultimately? If it's a bunch of middle class white people, and I mean there are working class white people as well, but like if it's not intended for if it's mostly frequented, it becomes frequented by a community that it's not initially intended for. If it's a bunch of people who don't necessarily need the space and who do it for you know, to fulfill a desire to be part of like the performing arts or to be on stage, then I understand like I think I understand the tension you're referring to in there needing to be more money injected into those communities because yeah.
Yeah. Kitoko, can we take a trip to Hamilton and would love to kind of pick up on what you had said earlier about the importance of fun in your practice. I have so many colleagues in Hamilton who are struggling in various capacities because it feels like there's lots and lots of artists there and more every day, but very little cultural infrastructure and very little development of the kind of critical mass that a city like Toronto or Montreal has of just how many people are making stuff and sharing stuff and how many things there are. How are you finding, bringing fun into that equation? Is that something that you're able to do easily? And also just actually maybe take a step back to like, when did that start for you, the importance of fun in your work? How does that come about?
The importance of fun. I'm like so nervous about sounding shady. I have a friend named Claude who's like one of my best friends, and she has been like rethinking her creative practice. In her bio, she wrote something about how she was noticing that a lot of her community members were making pieces out of trauma and then drowning in that. It wasn't really like nourishing. And I worked with Hamilton Fringe and Hamilton Fringe Festival of Theater. And we did a project called Changemakers, where we were looking at artists, activists, and trying to like get them to tell stories and then pull something out of that. And even in that, it felt like there was a lot of like, if these artists, activists are like doing something for the community, like who's nourishing them beyond like actually like giving them food to eat. And I found that I was there feeling very bitter because I just, come from Toronto and had like a bad time and felt like even like terms like activism were thrown onto me relatively young when I was just writing spoken word about my community and like what I literally was seeing outside and what I was feeling in my body. And so I think the idea of like trying to inject fun kind of comes from like watching white people, like middle class white people, and seeing how delightfully detached some of them can be from everything that's going on because they have a few layers of privilege that protect them. And then looking at my own communities of like exhausted, disabled Black women who are like doing activism and like don't have space for their own artistic practice. And we're all sad and we're all like anxious and scared. And like Hamilton is very much, I know it's a diverse city, but it doesn't really feel like that when you're participating in the arts. And when you excel, you kind of excel into white spaces and it's just you and a few other people of color who are like, I don't know. That's what it feels like for me. And so the desire for fun was like self-preservation and like trying to maintain my own mental health and make art making sustainable in a city where I don't really see myself a lot in the audiences or in leadership. And like, it's like a reminder to not always have to, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Sorry. I'm like kind of rambling because even when I was in Toronto, it's like I was trying to make art and I was like part of all these institutions and I just like wasn't having fun. Like it was like so boring to be like, I'm making a product and then I'm selling this thing and I have to like have a reading for this wave. Like I just wanted to talk about my art and like flesh it out and like play and then write. And like that wasn't enough. And it was like frustrating because I was only getting paid like not enough for my rent for 1 month. So I'm like, you're paying me to dream and this is what this work looks like, but that doesn't count. And so it's like not fun when like I can't make art under duress. Like I can't make art under capitalism. And so it's in my bio as a reminder to like, I'm also the art that I'm making and it's useless if I'm like drowning or dying or.
No, I hear you. It's almost a form of protest. It's a resistance, isn't it, to basically say I'm going to insist on fun, even when this machine that is kind of incentivizing the mining and exploitation of your trauma as your only story, because that's the box that you've been put into. Is that a fair characterization?
It's everything. Like all work is exploitative. Like I don't want to work. I don't want to work. I don't want to work. I don't want to. I want to retire and I want to like have fun with my friends and I want to like cook with my mom. And like,
Fair enough.
I think that as artists, we're exploited completely for the way that we look, because they need what we look like to like check the boxes on the grants and say that they helped a Black non-binary disabled person, whether or not they actually did that. And so it's like, if that is the game that we're playing, then I'm gonna go in there and do the absolute like minimum and like get the maximum and like have fun and like play. And so one of the ways that is manifesting is in this show that I'm writing with my friends, where we've just been like working on raps and we've just been like running the scenes, but we're gonna just go up on stage and surprise each other and see what happens. And like that's fun as like an actor. Anyways.
I resonate a lot with what Kitoko is saying. I think I was talking with this friend as part of Conversas, and we were laughing at this idea of, you know, tokenization, you know, how it also permeates like funding and all these things. And I said, you know, one of the things that I say sometimes, I just wish I could be as mediocre as many of the male counterparts, you know, when they do art, because they have this room where they can do whatever they want. You know, they can do art about form, you know, they can basically do what they want. But I think as a person of color, as a queer person, you also and women, we often expected to make art that reflects our suffering. And just that actually makes us ill, you know, at some point, you know, because we get you know, caught up in that cycle, you know. And I feel like in a way I also did something similar in terms of removing myself from that space. Going back to agency, you know, taking on my agency, it also meant that I didn't have to fall into categories like world music, which I never wanted to be part of something like that, because my
Everything is world music.
you know,
Literally
everything is world music.
anything in this world.
Exactly. You know, and I wanted to make art, you know, I wanted to make art. On a different note, I just wanted to go back to also, I feel like the issue of sustainability is really an important one for us, because I find I find myself as FEZIHAUS, but also like the reflections I've been on, having to dissociate sort of when I have to think about success in the arts, I have to sort of think it outside the money perspective, right? Because I think what is common in all the models that we're trying is that they're all questioning that middle part, the process where everything is not going well. And every solution that we're bringing in, whether it's Kitoko's solution or like mine, is also meant to question and redesign that element, which is where the issue is. I mean, getting to the product is important for whoever wants to fund to see it. But I think the problem that we have in the arts and entertainment in general is at the process level. This is where people are not getting paid. This is where people's works are not being respected. So I feel like we, in our own practices, in trying to sort of model new ways and all of that, I think we also caught up with that question. Are we going to do this for money, or we're going to do this for what it is, and to like sort of create new ways of thinking, which is, you know, it's difficult. It's a difficult place because we need to pay rent, we need to do all these things, but the work that needs to happen in the middle also has to be done. And I think we sort of the people who are sort of pioneering that in Canada in a way, you know. So I don't know if that, you know, resonates, but I just wanted to add that point, you know.
Elle, is that resonating for you?
I wanted to actually yeah, like Samito took it in a slightly different direction. So I don't know if
You can always go back one stop back to where Kitoko was. I think there was something you wanted to respond to about fun.
yeah, like about fun. I work as like I work part-time as an intervention worker at a community organization for trans health and advocacy. And we had a magician the other day. We invited we have like a monthly drop-in that people like in the community can attend, and we invited a magician, and no one has ever, like, no drop-in sort of special activity has ever been as successful as that magician.
Magician.
And that to me spoke to the healing nature, like the healing quality of fun. It was so much fun. Like you looked at like, I mean, I felt it in my body. Like I was so overjoyed, and like I looked at everyone, and people were just like smiling. They couldn't help but laugh, you know. So I think that fun is so important. It's true that we are compelled, you know, in our quote unquote marginalized identities to sort of like err on the side of trauma porn to satisfy a gaze that is like that stands outside of our lived experiences, our marginalized lived experiences. And I think that it's yeah, I find that that correlation between trauma and marginalized identity, so to speak, to veer towards toxicity if it becomes a prerequisite. Of course, there has to be space for us to talk about trauma, but like we don't just have to talk about that. Like I've often verbally advocated for like Black beauty, Black joy, Black success. Like we also want to see those stories. And I think that the last point I wanted to make in relation to fun is that to me, fun is not necessarily, and that's where there might be, I'm not sure, a bit of tension with what Kitoko said. I think that the notion of fun is also is equally as important for the audience, because if our audience doesn't feel like supporting for supporting art that is made in the community that they live in, I believe there can hardly like the future of you know art maybe you know maybe at risk. And so I like to think of my artistic practice as something that serves me first and foremost, but I always have the audience in mind, because I want it to be uh, like possibly like to a conversation, or if not a conversation, I want it to be impactful to whoever is going to see it. So if I touch on trauma, I want to tell the story in a way that doesn't come across so much as like trauma dumping, as just, oh, like that's like a very artful way of like telling something that was incredibly hurtful to me. And yeah, I just like, I not only do I want to have fun, but I also want people to have fun, whether the experience touches on like negative or positive feelings for them.
Thank you for that, and thank you everyone for this. Has been such a fascinating conversation about so many different things. I thought it was a very ambitious topic, and we have really done justice to that prompt that we were given. Since we've about 15 minutes left, when this was supposed to be a live event, this is when we would have gone into an open Q&A to our audience. But because we don't have a live audience, who hopefully will have a lot of fun when they listen to this on FEZIHAUS's podcast, Conversas, maybe we can do our own Q&A. How would you feel about asking each other some questions, maybe anything that you've heard one of the other panelists say in the last couple hours that is interesting to you, or something completely that has not been brought into the conversation that you would like to bring forward, something that you want to hear your fellow artist opine about. I'll open it up to anyone.
My question to both Kitoko and Samito is in relation to me like feeling like I don't know, like if it's, no, it's not nihilism, but like I tend to you know, I'm a natural born hater, and I tend to be, you know, pretty pessimistic about things. And so I'm like, is there a solution really, guys? Like, because I feel like there isn't. Is there a solution to like our grievances as humans who want to thrive in life and through our respective artistic practices? Or do we just keep on hating?
Just starting off with the easy questions here.
I feel like I keep trying to dream of solutions, but I feel like so new and so nervous of dreaming something that's a bit too nuts. I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is like the lore of like my collective, which is called Vampire. Because we're in the middle of like trying to like figure out like what is our mission, what is our mandate, how do we want to communicate who we are, and like we have this story where the vampire is this like sidestep out of the empire, and we could like delightfully just kind of like ignore and try something else with each other, and like it's like a decision. And I feel like we've all kind of like talked about different ways of like doing that, of like relying on like community, and like when you say like publicly funded, I think of crowdfunding and like trying to get money for like what if we're like creating our own subscriber bases instead of being like Theater Aquarius, like having their own, like if we each had our own and we had people who were like contributing to our artistic practice, kind of like a Patreon, or like kind of like the way that a lot of online sex workers run their businesses. Yeah, I found that when I did that labor, like sex work, I was really surprised by the impact of like 6,000 followers on Twitter and like the material benefit. I'm like talking about it like it's like cryptic, like I'm like afraid to like, but I don't know. Did that answer your question? Was that helpful?
I mean, not really. Not really, but at the same time, I think that what I wanted to say is that like it usually starts with dreaming. I think that like we fostered a place today that you know may lead like lead people in certain other directions by way of kind of like us disseminating what our dreams are, like by sharing what your dream is. It can, you know, through like across like through many people and like over time become a reality. Realities stem from dreams.
Do you think that could happen in our lifetime?
I don't know. I have very I have little hope. But you know, it's a bit of a rat race, right? You know, so we're all stuck in a system that conditions us to kind of like run past the others and try to, you know, try to make it. So yeah, I try to frame the idea of making it around you know, concepts that, you know, aren't exclusively rooted in late stage capitalism and more related to like my personal sense of like, you know, happiness, just my happiness. But it's not easy because we don't live in a vacuum, and like we constantly open up our phones and like see that like so and so is doing well. Why am I not like doing this?
Yeah, I think it's a hard question to answer. I do think that, you know, one of the issues we have is really, you know, I think success today is only seen through like very, very limited lenses, right? It's like we need virality, we need to have followers, right? So that we can somewhat leverage what we have to go get some other business somewhere else and generate money. But I think we got to a point where like I thinking of music 10 years ago, it was really possible to like, you know, drop a song and it goes up and you start having business and all of that. At this point, I just feel like for 90% of the people, we're just running after something that is just impossible to achieve. And in that sense, what I found comforting on my side was to sort of try and dissociate my success, like methodically from that. You know, I think for me, being successful at this point is being able to find a little bit of time to continue doing my practice, being able to get a little bit of money that I can, inject in this work, and then slowly try to get this work to people that can resonate with. And as long as I can do that, I feel like I'm very successful. And I feel like what happens is that what had happened since starting FEZIHAUS is that even without the support of the sort of empire, the work is slowly moving to a place where it's starting to resonate with some people who are relevant. For me to be able to sit down with Elle and talk, on a daily basis is really, really meaningful. To meet Kitoko is meaningful. To meet Belinda. And I feel like in that way, in a weird way, we're sort of building a robust system there based on like resource sharing. And I don't know if there's a future. I think the issue of sustainability is big because in the end, like sustainability is also making money. But in my experience, fully chasing money only got me ill. So I'm trying to like recognize that and sort of figure out other ways of feeling successful in my practice. I don't know if that answers your question, Elle, but I don't know. Like I'm a hater too. So yeah. So I don't know. Yeah.
I guess it's sort of like stressful to hear because I feel like when I fear success, like I don't want to excel because I don't think there's any point in excelling in like the systems that exist. I feel like they'll just devour you. And I think I'm also thinking about financial accessibility in connection with like health. Because those two things always feel like really linked for me. And like without like a day job that also like supports like the actual like limitations or needs of my body, I'm forced to like hustle, which like makes the art bad because I can't make art under like duress. You know? So I feel like, yeah, my dream is that we get rid of capitalism like right now and like get universal basic income like right now. Like I don't want to wait.
Am I allowed to respond, Elle, to your
Yeah.
question? I'm not a hater at all. I have a genetic condition probably that causes me to be delusionally optimistic. And it has served me very well so far because I always think things are easier than they actually turn out to be. But by the time I realize that, I'm already so far along that I might as well see them through. And almost everything I've ever attempted to do in my life or achieved has been a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. But I also am very, very grateful for all the things that came out of it. So the perspective I have right now is absolutely there's so much to be cynical about in the world, and it has given us good reason for that. And I can only continue to see in this group here with the folks that we've had this moment with, unbelievable amounts of resilience and adaptability and power. So to me, I'm leaving this conversation inspired, and I go like without while trying to get in their way, look at how much magic and look at how much wonder these folks are creating in the communities that they're activating and inspiring and energizing. And in all of what your stories were about, I don't know if you heard, but I really heard a theme of communities that you're part of, that you're deeply entrenched in, that you're not doing this for yourselves. You're all kind of pioneers, bringing forward so many folks with you, and there's a web there, and then you connect those links together, and suddenly everybody is connected. So, again, this is coming from a delusionally, hopelessly optimistic person. So take it with a big grain of salt. I can't guarantee the future, predict it, but I hear, wow, with all the barriers that we have put in place for so long, if this is possible, what happens when you remove some of the weights? What happens when you just put a little bit more gas in the car? What happens when we connect some of these dots together and you go from, working in silos to like the collaboration, which hopefully is the work that's, that's coming next from these conversations, from these. I'm seeing more and more of these things emerge every day. The kinds of artists that I get to meet these days, like even from when I started working in this business, and the theater business was very, very, very depressing to me when I started. And with every year, I go to more panels like this, more discussions like this. I see more voices that I've ever seen. I can't help but be optimistic. And I know Trump is going to be president, and I know that like the world is going to continue to go through a lot of challenge. And I also am just like, how are they going to hold us back? Like, there's just too many of us. There's just too much energy in this call alone. Sorry to get super cheesy on y'all, but it's Sunday long weekend. And our lovely host is back. I think that means that it's our time to start thanking you all for this incredible conversation and for this opportunity to be in conversation with you. I really have learned so much, and it's been so lovely to meet you all and learn so much about your lives and your practices.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
That I'll hand it over back to you, Belinda.
Sure, yeah. But Kitoko, you want to finish your thought?
Oh, I was just saying this was amazing. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm going to continue the thank yous. Thank you, listeners, for giving your attention to today's panel. And thank you to our moderator and our panelists for such insightful, rich discussions. I wanted to say a bit of my piece as well. You know, where this thematic comes from is thinking through the ways that Black, Indigenous, and disability justice communities are really innovators in technology, right? InterAccess is a new media artist-run center, and often when you think about technology, you know, the things that come to mind for a lot of people is like AI, like NFTs, like, you know, these kinds of very hyper-capitalistic machines for efficiency. You know, the value is very capitalist and et cetera. But if we think about technology as more broadly as an application of conceptual knowledge to achieve practical goals in a reproducible way, like community and these forms of mutual aid systems are also forms of technology. These ways that we're building resources, you know, emotional wellness as resource, ourselves as resources, the connections we make as resources. It really becomes such a meaningful paradigm shift into what we can really pursue with arts and culture. And I'm also a hater, you know, so a lot of the time I'm like, I don't know if it's really going to happen, but I think always I relate to your positivity as well in this moment where there are pockets of hopefulness. And so I really thank y'all for fostering that in this conversation and, you know, contributing your labor. Because I also, I also want to acknowledge that like the more intersectional folks are, the more labor they take on, not to like romanticize like labor all the time. And so to you all, like, thank you deeply for your labor. And so to our audience, we hope you'll stay up to date with the partner organizations and the panel contributors. We'll put social media handles and websites up on the screen, hopefully in post-production, as well as the podcast episode description. And until next time.